Record. I'll take you off the screen there.
Really got to try on that left-hand side. What happened?
But I've gone up and over and bloody head over biscuit. It wasn't enough stability there for myself, but no, I was busting for a bit to make this game. It didn't seem to work out.
Hello, cheers, and welcome to the Scrum of the Earth podcast, the weekly show for news, reviews, great interviews, and so much more all about the world of rugby. My name is David Lawrence. I'm an American rugby fan who follows the game wherever I can find it all over the globe. If you'd like to get in touch, well, I'm easy to find on all your socials, and you can always just drop an email to thescrumoftheearth@gmail.com. Well, as you have no doubt deduced, this is not your regular weekly episode, but is yet another bonus episode. This week, I'm thrilled to announce the return of the one and only Jamie Wall. Jamie has been covering the All Blacks as a touring journalist since 2017. He's a rugby pundit on TV and various media outlets. He's the author of 4 books, including the best-selling Brothers in Black. Jamie, kia ora, welcome back to the Scrum of the Earth. How the heck are you, my friend?
I'm David. I'm fantastic, mate. Thanks for having me back on.
Absolutely. I kind of wanted to jump in immediately and just start by asking you about the recently concluded NPC. We kind of just touched on it. I seem to recall, you don't follow it the most closely in the world, but I just got a feeling from your socials over the last couple of months that you were enjoying it a bit more this season. For me, it was a great year. Am I onto something with this? Were you into the NPC by the end?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was. I mean, the NPC, you got to remember, is a competition that is not at the level of, I guess, public consciousness that it once was, but it definitely was the competition that I grew up watching. So it's obviously got a very, very special place in my heart and the hearts of people my age, I guess, is probably the right way to say it. And it's been a very interesting year for the NPC because of the ongoing governance issues with New Zealand Rugby. It always kind of felt like its head was kind of on the chopping block, like they were going to do something about it. And there was a quote last year from Mark Robertson, the CEO of New Zealand Rugby, that kind of got taken out of context, but then got repeated enough that people started caring about it. And he said that what he was alluding to was, he said, well, the financial model of the NPC, which, for people who live in America, is probably would seem a bit strange, where the entire thing is essentially controlled, and all the players are essentially contracted, and therefore because it runs concurrently with the All Black season, the players are taken in and out
Oh, yes. I have something to ask about that soon.
Yeah. So, and what he was alluding to was saying that because there's quite a bit of angst over the last year between the provinces who make up New Zealand Rugby, or what used to be called the New Zealand Rugby Union, and the amount of power that they hold, and essentially the board of New Zealand Rugby was trying to wrestle a bit of that control upwards. And it's felt like a direct threat to the competition itself. And so I think, in my opinion, I think it's kind of made a lot more people care about it this year, because they felt like, well, if we don't actually get out and watch this thing, watch it on TV, attend games, then we might not see it again. We have to show New Zealand Rugby that we care about it. And so I think that's why there's been quite a sort of heightened interest in it. My own personal point of view, and you've got this lovely picture down there. That is my team. That is Wellington winning the NPC. They had a fantastic year this year,
What a
and
final!
it's
What a
obvious.
final!
And yeah, a great final played in some of the most atrocious conditions you'd
It
ever
was,
see a game of
but
rugby played in.
100 minutes showing on the clock at the end.
Yeah. It went all the way, and just some great storylines throughout the season as well. It was probably the closest NPC there's been for a long time. I think going into the week before the playoffs started, uh, I think all but like four teams had a shot of
Yeah,
finishing in the top four
those last
even.
two rounds, there was a ton of jeopardy.
Mm.
It was great.
Yeah. So it was a really interesting competition as well, and we saw, as per usual, like a lot of good young, um, promising players coming through, as well as the other thing about the NPC these days, which is that you have a lot of older guys who have come back from overseas who still have quite a bit to offer on the
Yeah,
field, and you see them sprinkled throughout the competition as well. So
Ryan Crotty
it's
was
the
getting
usual.
serious minutes there, like in the last three games of the year.
Yeah,
Incredible.
yeah, and Brad Shields for Wellington, was a massive
Yeah,
part of their win. And there's guys like that throughout the whole comp. And then of course you had the Ranfurly Shield as well, which provides this excellent like narrative running alongside
that
the
extra
competition.
wrinkle, it's so good. The
Yeah,
whole story with the Tasman this year when they wrested it finally from Hawke's Bay, and
yeah.
then Tasman lost it, and it was like both teams deflated after that. Like there's it. We've
Mm.
talked about the Ranfurly
It-
Shield a lot. Like there's something mystical about it, right? It has implications that go beyond the day-to-day games.
well, yeah. I mean, you definitely have. They had the Ranfurly Shield hangover in full effect
Big time.
this year, whereby a team loses it, it kind of messes up their motivation for the rest of the season. It almost tripped Hawke's Bay up, but they came right. Definitely tripped Tasman up though. They couldn't come right by the end of the season, and
That
it's
was my
sort
next
of
question,
all.
though. Like, how
Yeah.
good were the Mako this year? This was a great run for them. The scenes in the streets, the way that the people came out to celebrate the Shield win, it was incredible. It was a great year for them until it absolutely fell apart there at the end.
Well, the story of the season really has been how the regional teams, and when I say regional, I mean not the main centres,
Right,
teams have got quite a lot of support. And it's because basically they've been told, hey, it's kind of up to you guys to get people back and to watch these games. And so we've
hmm.
seen a lot more effort put into marketing, a lot more effort put back into connecting with the community. I think Tasman did a really good job of that, and Taranaki did as well, and so did Hawke's Bay. And when they all had the shield, and obviously having the shield helps because it just draws a lot of attention to your team and to what you're doing around the community, and you've got something to take around the community and be like, hey, look, we've won a
Right.
trophy, even though it isn't even the end of the year. So you cash in on those things, and I think Tasman did a really good job of doing that. We also saw a great turnout in Southland. They had probably their best season in quite
Yeah.
a while. They started their season with a really well attended game against Otago, which was a great way to start off because obviously that's their derby match, and they also won it, which helped as well. And results wise, yeah, they had their best season in ages, and it just sort of went to show that, like, okay, if you put a bit of effort into these things and don't just rely on um, people just watching on TV and just like the sort of media coverage, because really, like, you're not going to get the media coverage you had in the old days. You have to kind of do it yourself.
Hmm.
And I think that teams and unions are finally kind of getting their head around that. It's just a shame that the final was played in such horrific weather in Wellington, and
Yeah.
having grown up there, I can tell you that it's a pretty hard sell getting people along to a stadium in Wellington in those sort of conditions. So
They
I
came
think they
out.
actually did
It
pretty.
looked like a good crowd.
Yeah, I mean they got a good crowd. Should have been a great crowd. But yeah, like I said, the weather kind of played its part. But in terms of the game, in terms of a showpiece, like that final was really good, and it just was culminated in a season's worth of like some really good rugby. So I wouldn't say provincial rugby in New Zealand is like super healthy, but it's definitely on an upward trend
Mm.
right now, and it's something for the provinces to really build on for next year.
Kini Naholo is just one of the names that stuck out for me this year who kind of seemed to make the leap. Are there other NPC players who are like, ooh, this guy, I'm going to be seeing him the next 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, to be fair, he did have a pretty good season for the Hurricanes. So he was already on the map in terms of like Super Rugby profile.
Sure.
And so it's really no surprise to see him in the All Blacks 15 at the moment. I personally, I would have liked to have seen him get a test run by now, because I think that the All Blacks
Hmm.
wing was at one of their wing positions. I think was really up for grabs, and I would have liked to have seen them kind of roll the dice on that a
Interesting.
little bit. But I think you're going to see a lot more of Kenny Naholo going forward. Hopefully, he can really nail down one of those wing spots for the Hurricanes this year. It kind of feels like he has, because um, like one of them's wide open at the Canes right now, so it's his to kind of take. So
He seems like one
uh,
of those players where they always talk about his offense and then they say, well, he's got some work on. So on the other side.
yeah, that's true, but he will very much learn those in the high performance setup that he's in right now.
Mm,
That's why they have the All Blacks 15, it's so they can integrate these guys into their systems and just go, okay, this is this is your finishing school essentially,
nice.
and it's how you're going to be able to get picked for the All Blacks eventually and slot straight into our what we're trying to do. You'll know how to defend. We can count on you. We can count on you under the high ball, that sort of thing. So that's the path that he's on at the moment.
So Taranaki and Hawke's Bay, they both have some favorite Free Jacks of mine. So I was bummed that both our teams were out before the final. So do you like it when, teams repeat, or do you think it's better for the competition if every year people feel like, you know what, we have a real shot?
Well, it's definitely been better when it's been open, and also, I mean, you can make that comparison to Super Rugby. Like, the reason why Super Rugby was so interesting this year is because all of a sudden the Crusaders were rubbish, and the the past 7 years, you found yourself wondering why you were watching it, because you knew who was going to win.
It was a
This year,
competition for who comes in second for sure.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this year with the NPC, it really did feel like it was sort of anyone's. You couldn't, knowing Wellington, you weren't actually going to believe that they could win it until the trophy was literally in their hands. That's the sort of team that they are, and they did their best to make it like leave that until the literal final minute of the game. So
Exactly. I
it's
thought
I
I thought
don't think
Taranaki might repeat. I was just rooting for
yeah.
for Jason Patras to win 4 championships in like 2 calendar years.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, Jason Potros, who's a patron saint of the NPC.
He
He,
really is.
I think it's actually quite difficult to establish what you call like a dynasty
Right.
in provincial rugby, because you have the added pressure of the player markets from overseas. Because if you get kind of good, you're either going to go up to the All Blacks or to a Super Rugby team or to the All Blacks 15 or something that's going to take you out of French rugby. And if you don't feel as though that pathway is there, you're going to start looking overseas to Japan, to France, to MLR, uh, places like that. And so keeping one team together, like all of those key guys, is actually pretty difficult.
Yeah.
So for a team to even win two in a row would be quite an achievement. And
Well,
then the other side of that is it's actually quite hard to hang on to the same coaches. Orlando Solkai, who coached Wellington to that championship, has already left. He's already got a
oh
gig
wow.
with
Okay.
Moana Pacifica in Super Rugby. So they're all looking upward. Everyone's kind of looking for a way out. It's a springboard to other places, and it always has been, to be
Interesting.
fair.
Well,
And it's been a long time since teams can really dominate it the way that Canterbury and Auckland used to.
well, it's incredible how you teed that up because I was going to ask if you were in charge, like what is something you might tweak to make the NPC better? So I thought it was weird late in the season, at the start of the broadcast, the comms would be talking about, well, Team A asked for permission to get so and so many All Blacks released, and they were told no. But the other team, guess what? They've got 5 All Blacks this week. And like as a fan, that's kind of exciting. It's kind of one of the random things that makes it interesting. But as a club, that must be really difficult.
Well, you can forecast who you are and aren't going to get back. So Taranaki, for example, we're never going to get any of the Barretts back because they're too important to risk in the NPC game. But they would get Josh Lord back, for example, because he needs the game time.
Interesting.
And across the teams as well, like Wellington got stung by it as well. They lost their best player for their last 2 games, and Peter Lakai, because he was called up to the All Blacks, and
Right.
that's just something that teams all have to deal with. And it's like I said, it's a pathway to go somewhere else, and that somewhere else might eventuate in the season itself.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was a lot of All Black sort of infusion in like the quarterfinal round, and then they were gone because there was camp and there was other things happening, and so suddenly it was like, guess what? You're on your own. It made it for a different complexion,
Yeah.
I guess.
I get to go back to your question is, what would you do? What would I do to change that?
Yeah.
Is definitely not let that happen at such a crucial part of the season because it felt a little unfair to because everyone's teams like completely changed. Wellington played counties in their quarter final, and both teams had key players coming in, and so it wasn't really the teams that had made it that far. I think in order to respect the competition, you can do it throughout the season because the All Blacks come and go. That's just again what the competition's there for. But to protect the integrity of it, you've got to leave those last 3 weeks for guys who have played a certain number of games. That yeah,
Yeah.
like it is in every other grade in New Zealand, because this is what happens at club level as well. You can go through a season and your senior reserve team might make the finals, but your premier team doesn't, and all of a sudden you've got 23 guys available for a really important part of the season. So there's rules around how many of them you can use, and they have to have played X amount of games for the reserve team to be eligible to play.
Well, it's funny too because you know the almost like opposite side of that coin eventuated when the Free Jacks were the top seed in the MLR a few years ago, and when the New York team still existed, they just brought in a bunch of Kiwis in the last 2 weeks. So suddenly we're having this Eastern Conference final, and Nini Milner Scudder's out there, and Waisaki Naholo's out there, and I'm like, what the? Like this isn't fair. So I totally sympathize with the NPC. It seems like we're simpatico in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it feels like it. But then at the same time, you have to ask the question like, okay, well, what's this actually for? Well, why are we doing this? Like, to be fair, like those guys coming in on the quarterfinals, they need to play. Cam Roigard needed to play rugby in
Right.
order to get up to speed. So now he is on the bench for the All Blacks this weekend in a very important Test match. Like that needed to happen. They couldn't just invent some other game for him to go and play. So it's a real balancing act, and it kind of feels like the integrity of the competition will always kind of take a second place to what the All Blacks actually need. And given that the All Blacks are the ones making all the money and the biggest brand going around, it's kind of always going to have to be that way, unless they change when the season gets played, which is not going to change because
Mm.
there's no other time to play it.
No, it seems impossible. Well, you once again teed that up perfectly. The All Blacks switching gears over to the national team. The All Blacks just opened their lengthy autumn series with a spicy win at what I'm calling Allianz London. What were your takeaways from this game?
Yeah, I think it was probably in terms of a performance, not the most satisfying performance, but probably the most satisfying result the All Blacks have
Mm.
had this year in terms of the way they went about it. They have had issues this year, all year, with scoring points in the back end of games, like the last half hour of games. And not only did they do it this time around, they managed to do it and in order to win the game. So very pleased with that from an All Black point of view. It obviously wasn't perfect. There were a lot of handling errors in there that just should like have to be cleaned up. if they want to
Why
be able
was
to play
the
the.
why was the line out so conservative? It seemed like they were scared at the line out.
Oh, or it's because Cody Taylor got injured in the first 3 minutes, and that
Oh,
got
okay.
they had to bring us up more on who's not the best line-out thrower
Okay.
by his own admission, and so it felt like they had to simplify things there. I also think though there's been a lot of chat about the All Blacks line-out this year, and like rightfully so. But on the weekend, they were up against a very good opposition. I
For
think
sure.
that England probably have um, one of the best, if not the best, defensive line-out setups going around. At least the guys who are there are very, very good, and Atoje and George Martin at pinching ball, and if not pinching, just disrupting that sort of play. So I think that's why it was probably pretty conservative. They were just trying to just get the ball in and maintain possession there. Uh, but yeah, it was just going back to the performance itself. It's like they were probably trying a few too many things without kind of earning the right to
Hmm.
do so.
Fair.
But at the same time, what I was really pleased with was their ability to really exploit some key deficiencies in the English defence.
Oh, like what?
Um, Eng- England's defence is built on rushing up and everything. And so it was just a case of kind of just waiting and waiting till you could stretch them a little bit wide. And what you'll see when in Talia and Jordan's tries is that they managed to isolate Ellis Genge in space, and he's a prop, and he's got far too much. He had far too much space to defend,
Yep.
and so they made quick decisions on the fly when the ball probably was originally going to be going the other way, and they figured out like, wait, let's get it to this guy. Let's get it wide. Let's isolate Ellis Genge, and they did, and it worked twice. And Will Jordan ended up scoring a touch rugby try because of it, because Bowden managed to figure out, look on the blind side, see that they were two men. It was a 2-on-2, and if he came across, created that inside cut, Will Jordan versus Ellis Genge is only ever going to be one winner. So that was a really good uh, example of the All Blacks just being pretty ruthless, which is what they kind of haven't been in the last sort of 4 or 5 years. Like they've just been a little bit tactically naive around that, and sticking to their processes rather than actually just being like, hang on, there's this huge opportunity right here which we should take right now, rather than going three more phases in order to go to take advantage of it when we've been coached to do it. So I really like that.
How is Will Jordan this good? Like, it's always that he picked the line that just magically works. Does he have a piece of magic in him, or is he just like, no, no, no? My awareness is at such a level that I'm always at the right place at the right time. Like, it just doesn't make sense how productive he is when I just look at him.
He's a bit of both, really. Like he's in a system that it takes advantage of his abilities. It's pretty freakish abilities. Like he's fast, he's strong. He's got a great awareness. He runs like really good lines. And then also, yeah, he's got an attacking game plan that's kind of built around him. It's there
Hmm.
for him to score. All of the All Blacks moves. He's generally the guy who's the last one to catch the ball. And like I said, with that one he scored on the weekend, Bowden had completely figured out, like, if I just give him this one guy on our team the ball here, he's going to score. So he's also got his teammates working for him as well, and like, why not? Because if you look at last year in that Rugby World Cup quarter final against Ireland, it was his try that really kind of gave the All Blacks like decent enough arms length against
Yeah.
Ireland, and he was the only guy on the park who could have done something like that.
Well, you just mentioned them. The New Zealand schedulers were not. They didn't go lightly this year. They've got Ireland in just a couple of days. Jamie, by the way, at this game, are we going to hear some like wrestling style music and see Johnny Sexton march out onto the pitch, tearing his shirt off and calling Rico?
I hope so. That would be pretty funny. But I think that even without that, what happened between him Rieko Ioane. I think that there's enough feeling in this one to make this, right up there with the Springboks as the biggest test of the year
Yeah.
for the All Blacks. There's just clearly a lot of angst between the two teams, mainly because of the way that their game went down the year before, and then also the fact that Ireland came down and won a series here in New Zealand, which
That
was,
changed everything, right?
absolutely it did. I mean, don't get me wrong, like Ireland were a good team before that, and then like no one was taking them lightly when they came down. But that was the first series loss the All Blacks have had in New Zealand in uh, you know almost 30 years.
Right.
So it came as a real shock. And to then turn around and reverse that a year later, that was a bit of a shock too, because there wasn't too much confidence here in New Zealand about them winning that quarterfinal.
Interesting. Um, as I was writing this question, I couldn't believe I was writing it. Do you think the All Blacks can win in Dublin this weekend?
Yeah, I do. I do. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, it's not a guarantee or anything. I give them uh, a massive chance because they are the All Blacks. Like this is winning Test matches is what their entire brand is built on. So you have to give them. You should never write them off
Right.
ever. And can they win? Yeah, absolutely they can, because if you take all the good parts out of what they've achieved this year and they can string them all together, they can beat anybody. If they have an off day, they can unfortunately lose to anybody as well,
Yeah.
which is what New Zealanders are kind of struggling to come to terms with at the moment. But they are obviously like a work in progress. They do have a new coaching staff. They have some new key players who have come in, and the rate of incremental change that's gone around the team, and is in like, well, you look at that team that started that first test against England. It's a different team that the one that they're going to be rolling out on Saturday morning, and the guys that have come in, uh, it wasn't like a complete clean out at the start of the year, or there wasn't any sort of reactionary selections.
For
It was
sure.
done in phases. And so you can clearly see that Scott Roberts has got an idea in his head of how they want to play. It's just that they need to get to that level. And that's why the result on the weekend was so pleasing, was because they didn't actually play as well as they have this year, but they still found a way to win, and that's a very All Black thing to be able to do.
So I already said, like, I just feel weird even using the phrase, can the All Blacks win, followed by any random words after that. A lot of people are fond of saying right now, the shimmer is gone, the aura has gone from New Zealand rugby. Do you think that's true? And if so, can they get it back?
No, I don't think that's true. I don't. I think that if you were to ask any opposition player, any opposition coach, they would be treating this All Black team the same way they treat any All Black team in terms of preparation. The day that a team starts resting players against the All Blacks, then you can say that the aura is gone,
Oh,
and
that's a great point.
that's not um, going to happen anytime soon. And especially when you look at the team that Ireland have selected for this Test match, we're at the start of a new World Cup cycle. Like when in a bunch of tests, which, like, objectively, from an objective point of view, these are the least important tests of the year. Like, there's
Yeah,
no trophy on the line. They're essentially a run of exhibition
yeah.
games that
The
just
quintessence
have
of the
some.
friendly.
Yeah, exactly. And still, Ireland have selected their very best side for this game, and with no sort of like future, and they have plenty of guys in their setup who are going to be play big parts in this team over the next 3 years when they lead up to a World Cup. And they haven't selected them. They've gone with most of the team that played the All Blacks last year. So that in itself proves to me that the aura is definitely there, because they're doing everything they possibly can to win it.
Do you expect something special in terms of a game plan from Andy Farrell? Like, from where I sit, it kind of seems like his game plan is, I'm going to keep doing exactly what we're doing until you all figure it out.
Well, the thing about the Irish game plan is that you may well be able to figure it out before it goes in, but there's not an awful lot you can do about it
Right.
if they get on a roll. If they get their front football, it's all based on micro skills and playing the ball at pace and just sending guys at the line as often as possible and essentially just wearing teams out so that they can just create space out wide, which is I'm not going to say it's simple because a lot of it involves some very intricate,
Mm.
moves and guys, playing roles and things. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that you could know all of this in advance, and if your team can't keep up with it, there's nothing much you can do about it. So I am expecting more of the same out of them with enough subtle shifts that it's not just going to be a complete rehash of what happened last year or what they did against the Springboks earlier this year. I think we're going to see something that's been specifically prepared for the All Blacks to target what is perceived to be uh, their weaker elements on the field. Uh, but at the same time, it's like that whole ethos of we're going to play our way, and it's up to you to figure out how to beat us
Yeah, yeah.
is a very admirable trait in a Test rugby team. And I have to congratulate Ireland for reaching a point where they can do that because that's generally how the All Blacks have played over their entire history.
Well, Andy Farrell won Coach of the Year. Was it last year? I'm getting a little confused, but is he a coach that is capable of reacting, or does he just kind of just build something and then, like we said, like it's this thing, and then once it's working properly, other teams just kind of fall by the wayside because they can't deal with it? Is he like, uh, and I'm not criticizing because I think he's a great coach. Is he a one-trick pony?
No, I don't think so. No, he's managed to take a team that everyone had thought had hit their high watermark under Joe Schmidt
Mm.
in terms of like, well, you've got all these great players and you have this successful pathway system that you've created, and but everyone had sort of thought once Joe Schmidt left, like, okay, well, this is about where they're going to stay.
Yeah.
That kind of level. It's like, yeah, they'll win the Six Nations every now and then, and they'll challenge the All Blacks when they'll bomb out of the World Cup. Farrell's come in and taken them to the next level, whereby now they're kind of expected to win all their Test matches,
Yeah.
and fair enough too because they've managed to produce these better players. And if you look at their team, the real strength of their team is, like I said, is the amount of guys that they've left out. These guys who like there's some real like, wow, okay, geez, that guy was really good. I was expecting him to play on this team. Guys like Jack Crowley, for example, um, and Kelvin Nash, and guys like that. And you start to say, well, the caliber of the guys that they're leaving out leads you to believe that the team that they're actually putting out must be pretty bloody good.
So after this weekend, the ABs they pop over to France for another team that would absolutely love and relish a rare win over New Zealand. Are you expecting an All Blacks win at the Stade de France? By the way, will fatigue maybe start to play a factor after two tests in a row versus England and Ireland?
Well, you can already start to see the attrition rate on this
Mm.
tour already because the All Blacks are missing Cody Taylor and Beauden Barrett, two of the most experienced guys.
Oh,
Um, and so
Bowden, that's
you've
rough.
got these two key players missing already. So what that casualty ward's going to look like this time next week when they're selecting a team will probably determine how I'd be feeling about this game because a couple more injuries and you actually start to go, okay, we're in a bit of a crisis right now because I feel like they kind of already are at the moment. They brought in a Safa Amoa who, like I talked about earlier, is not the most confident at lineouts. So that's like they're really kind of handing the Irish a bit of an advantage there. Like, don't get me wrong, like he's a very good player. He can make up for it around the field. But if it comes down to key 5 meter lineouts at either end of the field, I'd much rather have Cody Taylor there than a Safa Moore. And then at first five, you have Damien McKenzie coming in, who, just unfortunately has this reputation of being real rocks and diamonds. I think it's a little unfair the way that he's been tagged with that, but he
I
does. He
have a
has.
whole little bit coming up to ask you about Damien in just a minute.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, right, well, we can wait for that. But I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that you've got two guys that are missing this weekend. Not sure whether they'll be back the weekend after, but after this test match, we could be looking at a couple more guys missing out as well.
did they overschedule this tour? Like, not everybody played this past weekend. Is it too much? Was the idea we want to get Scott Robertson as many tests as possible? Like at the very beginning of a World Cup cycle, like what was the thinking behind this?
It's a good question because I guess if they go ahead and win all these tests, then no.
Then it was
But
just the right amount.
if they drop the next two, then they're actually in the territory of like the most losses in All Black season ever.
Right.
So they kind of knew that going in, but at the same time, I mean, they're playing 14 this year, which is the most um, I think equal most in a season. Yes. Two of those were just blatant commercial opportunities, like the one
Yep.
in San Diego and the one in Tokyo. And like I have no problem with that. Like
No,
that's
me neither.
they need to make some money, and it didn't really. I mean,
It's funny
it
because
didn't hurt.
those are always the money making games, but they're also the games I'm the least likely to spend my own money on.
No, you're absolutely right. But plenty of other people do. So
Yep.
yeah, fair enough, I guess. I think that the biggest challenge that the All Blacks have had this year is in terms of like what Scott Robertson was going into was he was the first coach in ages to have to play South Africa in South Africa twice. And that was always going to be really difficult
Yeah.
because of the fact that the Springboks are world champions. They're playing at home, which makes it even harder. So that you're already kind of chalking up two potential losses on the board before you even get started because it's the one team where you're like, okay, these this is going to be a lot harder than the Bledisloe Cup or anything like that. So the fact that they had to go there and then they did lose both, albeit by pretty fine margins. Like
Yeah,
they're
they
still
were good
losses.
games.
It's still unacceptable for the All Blacks to lose
Yeah.
tests. And so now when we get to the end of the year and you start to sort of add them up, and the real killer was that one against Argentina because like no one really saw that coming. The
Argentina, they good game, bad game, good game, bad game, and you just
well,
don't want to be in the off week.
I mean, it's definitely the All Blacks' worst performance of the year by
Yeah.
like quite a long way. And they the absolute worst team to do it against because the Pumas didn't need any more of an invitation to be like, yeah, okay, we're gonna take this one because we've done it before, and also they're a better team than they were than the one that won in New Zealand a couple of years back,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
they but also the other thing is the further we get away from that result, the more kind of acceptable it becomes because you actually realize like
Hmm.
actually Argentina is really good right now.
Hmm.
They're in a very good patch of their history. They've got a very good coach. They have a number of very good players, and they went off. They turned around and beat Springboks like not long after. So
Yeah.
it's a hard one to take because the All Blacks should not be losing any games at home, but it's clear that Argentina are a really good side right now. And so, but you add those losses up.
Wellington is the bogey home venue for New Zealand. What's going on with Wellington?
Oh, don't ask. I have no idea. Like, we've been trying to figure out what's been going on. But it just feels like they just save their worst rugby for when they play
It really
in
seems that
Wellington.
it's weird. If you look at the record, it's uncanny.
Yeah, I mean they kind of got rid of it a little bit with their second Bledisloe Cup win.
Yeah,
Where they Yeah, but at
but
the
I
same
mean,
time, it should not be that the All Blacks' worst ground player is a home venue for them.
right. So the All Blacks wrap up their tour at what I'm calling Allianz Turin. Is Italy a potential banana skin for them, or can they kind of pencil in a W right now to close things out?
I don't know what that's on. Like this, so Humboldt win that one by 50 points, and if they don't, then I'll be surprised because this happens. This fixture is the most predictable fixture in Test rugby. The All Blacks versus Italy. It's just a shame for the Italians that
See,
it
even if I
always.
felt that way, I would never dare to say that out loud.
Well, I mean, I've been to enough of them to where it's all gone exactly the same way. It's, it's a shame because these tend to happen during World Cups as well, and I don't know what goes on with the draw, but like how Italy gets drawn in the same pool as the All Blacks pretty much every World Cup.
It's
So it
like
just
Wales and
ruins their
Fiji. It's uncanny.
exactly. So but at least that's interesting. Like this one is not like it's probably the worst fixture that the All Blacks can have. It's why they don't play Italy and New Zealand because like no one would go and watch it either.
Oh,
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, this is no disrespect to like the
no.
Italian rugby community or anything, but like this kind of falls into the same category as the other ones in terms of why it's getting played. Like it's to take the All Black brand to a market where there's people who want to buy tickets, want to buy jerseys, want to set haka, that sort of thing. They have sponsorship relationships with Italian companies as well, so it all kind of you know falls like really on this tour. They should have played this test like first or second
It feels that way, right?
because it's
On
going
the other
to
on the
be
other
it's
hand,
going to be
they
such
have
a
a slow ramp down, I guess.
it feels like a real fizzle to end it wrong.
Well, Italy obviously have never beaten the All Blacks, and they've never even drawn with them. If they broke that streak this weekend, and neither of us think so, would that be better for Italy or worse for New Zealand?
That's not going to happen. it's, that's um,
It's a
this is
moot
like
question
me.
right off the
This
bat.
is like this is like me telling you that the sun. Like, oh, what's going to happen if the sun doesn't come up tomorrow? Like, there's not. It's not happening.
Oh man, you're making so many headlines if this actually happens for somehow. Um, by the way, this reminds me, it's kind of a two-parter. What is your overall assessment of the reign of Scott Robertson so far? Like, what score out of 10 would you give him for his performance with the All Blacks? Are you seeing progress? And the second part of that is, do most New Zealanders agree with you? Do you think you share the sort of common opinion right now about Scott Robertson and how Razor's been doing?
I certainly can't speak for all New Zealanders, but I can definitely, as someone who, pardon me, works quite closely with the team and gets an idea of like what the day to day life is like. It's clearly like a guy who's learning on the job. Like Test rugby,
Mm,
if there's one thing that Scott Robertson's tenure has shown us right now, is the difference between Super Rugby and Test rugby. It's 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 miles apart, and
yeah.
he's figuring that out.
Mostly
And I
because of
think
the time with the team, do you think? Is it all
yeah,
about that?
yeah. That's exactly what it is, in my opinion. You hit the nail on the head because, like, normally with his Crusaders team, they'd be getting together like now, and they'd have all summer to you know, perfect the way that they're going to play, and then they integrate the All Blacks back in, and they'd have this team culture all set up and everything that's built on like months of being together and spending time together, eating together, getting to know each other. With the All Blacks, you've only got like 2 weeks at a time to do that. And you have to figure out how to do all of that sort of stuff and get a team, you know, firing and sell the idea to the public that you are the best you possibly can be in a couple of weeks. And I think it's taken him a while to get his head around that.
Yeah.
So, which to me, honestly, is a little bit surprising considering how hard he lobbied for this job, publicly. I kind of would have thought he would have known that. And so in that case, I'd give them about like a 7 out of 10 because they have won most of their games. Like I'll give them that,
Yeah.
and they did go within sort of 4 points of beating the Springboks at Ellis Park, which is not an easy thing to do. I feel like any other country in the world would be seeing that as a major milestone. And the All Blacks are the only team that will probably be disappointed, like massively disappointed with that kind of result. Uh,
Here's a
so
sorry.
yeah, I'm just saying, like it's probably not as good as we thought it was going to be, but it's certainly not as bad as it possibly could be.
But the general mood throughout the nation is not, oh, we're calling for his head. People aren't saying this is not good enough.
No, I don't think so. I think what people in New Zealand have managed to get their heads around is the fact that it is a rebuild, and it's one word you can't really associate with the All Blacks. Well, the All Blacks can't associate with themselves, not publicly anyway, because that's acceptable. Because what if you were to say, "Hey, we're in a rebuild," you're just going to have to bear with us for a year or so. Is what you're saying is you're admitting, "Hey, we're going to lose Test matches," and the All Blacks can't do that. And not just because of a pride thing; it's literally a financial thing. Like their entire brand is built on the fact that
Interesting.
they should win every test. That's their point of difference, and their brand identity is built on that.
There's no coaching position in rugby that has that level of pressure, right? Scott Robertson walked into the biggest pressure cooker job he could possibly have in rugby.
I don't think so. I mean, I can't really talk for other nations, but I feel like there's not really anywhere else in the world where you literally can't say, "Hey, bear with us."
Right,
Like we're going to be trying some things this year. Like even Steve Borthwick can say that, and that's with England. Like the
right.
most highest resource, biggest playing base, most media attention team, other than the All Blacks, and he can get away with losing to Fiji and keeping his job. So I think that just from a perception point of view, a public perception point of view, yeah, you're probably right.
Here's a weird one for you. Do you think Razor's enjoying the job? Like, it seemed like an inevitability. Like you mentioned, he was lobbying for the job, but it also felt like the forces of nature were forcing him into this position. I just wonder if he kind of got swept into it. Is it possible he's like, you know what? Maybe this wasn't a good idea right now.
Yeah, that was a good question. I think that any coach would have days where he'd be like, "Man, what did I sign up for? Yeah, I
Mm,
wasn't expecting this," especially after losses, especially after intense media scrutiny and things like that. But I think I've seen enough out of him to just see how stoked he is when they win and how happy he is when they play the way that he's wanting them to. And you can see that in the emotion over the weekend at Twickenham when they won. Like you don't usually see coaches up and bouncing out, or All Black coaches up and bouncing out of the chairs and hugging each other after a win like that. So I think on the whole, yes, he is. But if he's not having days or at least moments where he's like, "Oh man, what have I got myself into?" then I I would question his sanity, really.
Well, as I mentioned, I wanted to put aside just a quick special moment for Damien McKenzie. He's a player I've loved for years. I feel like the media are never sure about him. They're never sure what to make of him in terms of how he fits into the All Blacks. They love him until he's in an All Blacks 23. Please enlighten me. What does the future hold for DMAC? Is he going to bounce back and forth between 10 and 15 until he eventually doesn't get picked for either?
I think we'll know by early next season where he actually sits in the depth chart. I mean, it was very telling that Bowden was picked at 10 for that game against England. That makes uh, it made it pretty clear, like sort of where DMAC sort of stood on the depth chart. The fact
I've
that
heard a
he's
lot of
come
people
back
say
in,
he should start at 15 or come off the bench at 10.
yeah, yeah. It's. I mean, he made a real statement. He really backed that case up on the weekend because coming off the bench, he played a really steady hand. Nervously kicked a conversion to win the
What a
game
kick. What a kick.
for the All Blacks, and it kind of proved a few doubters wrong about his ability under pressure because he's had his moments this year. To be fair, like I love watching him play too. I think he's a fantastic player. and I think that he's one of the best players to watch in World Rugby. But I'm also going to say like he is capable of doing some pretty dumb stuff, and we saw that in that game, that first test against England, where he took too long to take a shot at goal. We saw that in Sydney
Yep.
when he chucked away a couple of tries there, and just some moments where it just sort of backed up everyone's like, come on, man, like we want you to be good, but you need to be good all the time, like Prime Bowden was, or like what Dan Carter was. That's the sort of 10 we need. We need to be able to trust you. And I just feel like he's just got this level of, the level of trust with him is always going to be pretty low um, going into tests until he needs to kind of prove himself every time he plays.
It feels like the criticism is very similar to Marcus Smith, where people are like, "Oh, he's too flashy. He's good at the club level when he can do those things, but as soon as he gets to the test level, he's trying too hard. He's too flashy." Do you think that's true? I don't buy that for either of those players.
I don't think so either because I like both those guys. I think they're fully capable of playing a solid kicking game as well. I think it probably there is definitely a perception that they're not exactly not noted defenders, especially at 10. Um, but at the same time, like D-Mac's work on defence at fullback, and you just need to look at that test against Japan where he pulled off a couple of really good cover tackles
Yeah.
in the corner there. I mean, yes, it was a test against Japan, so like some of the intensity level was pretty low, but he is still capable of making some good defensive plays. I think the comparison to Smith is pretty valid. They both are held in the same kind of light as what sort of player. I think that ironically though, Smith is given a lot more leeway by English fans because they've been crying out for a guy like this for years.
Great
They've
point.
never had a guy like him before at 10. Their most famous guy that's ever worn that jersey, Johnny Wilkinson, was very much like a safety first guy. Don't get me wrong, he had a great running game and was able to light up a backline and everything, but you tend to associate him with kicking and everything. So for them, it's something new, and it's also something that is like, well, we're gonna have if we're ever gonna actually be sort of better than what we've normally been, we need a guy like this. Whereas Mackenzie, for us, we have a lot of players like him. He's
Mm.
just simply the best at it right now. And so whether he's the right pick for the Blitz, and ironically, like a lot of the calls have been coming out, is to give Harry Plummer a run at
Mm.
10 because of what he did with the Blues this year and
Huh.
his perceived steady hand that he has, that he's more of a game manager. And it's just kind of
Interesting.
ironic that like English fans want like a flashy, you know,
Right.
running first five, and New Zealand fans would rather have a kicking conservative guy.
Is DMAC locked in for the All Blacks for the next 5 or 6 years, or does he have to worry?
Oh yeah, he stays. He stays. There's a role. There's definitely a role for him because he's definitely in the best 23 players in the country,
Okay.
and he's re-signed, and he's not going anywhere. If that's what you're asking, it's just a matter. The big question mark is what number jersey does he wear because he's
Mm.
going to be there no matter what.
What jersey should he be wearing for you?
Um, for me, I mean, if everyone's fit and healthy, I'm still not 100% sold on him at 10. I like him at
Yeah.
15. I like him at 23. Um, but I, I I guess I'm one of the people that would just kind of like to see Plummer given a go,
Hmm.
just to see what happens. And that maybe the All Blacks weapons are better utilized by someone who's um, just moving the ball on, you know, like making the
Right.
right decisions rather than someone who's trying to do it, instigate it themselves.
Interesting. Is Richard Milwanga coming back into the mix at some point? I'm hearing all these little things. The Razor wants him back. He's going to be back.
Yeah. I think the mail is that he's back in 2026.
Yeah.
A lot can happen between now and then, though. Um, you know, DMAC might turn around and have an absolute blinder next year, or Bowden might turn around and have an absolute blinder, and just the All Blacks could run the table next year, and so
Wow.
Mo'unga coming back might be irrelevant. Um,
Oh,
but uh, also you're getting Mo'unga back after 2 seasons of playing
yeah.
rubbish rugby in Japan
I
as
don't.
well.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, like plenty of guys
He,
have gone up there
he's not going to
and
come back better, right?
well, that's pretty unlikely. The question is whether he comes back the same as what he
Right.
was when he left. Don't get me wrong, like plenty of guys have done it. Ironically, DMAC was one that probably benefited from a bit of time
Yeah.
over there, but there's been a lot more that have just that it's done nothing for the game at all.
Bowden looks pretty good too.
Uh, yeah, exactly. So I don't know. It's too far off in the future to really make an accurate call on. It's something that's been asked about all year, from like literally the first press conference until like right now that Scott Robertson gets asked about,
Right.
and it's the same answer all the time, which is that it's very ambiguous, but it's obvious that he wants him back. Just how he's going to do it under NZ Rugby's
It
like
seems like he's
rules
lobbying.
is yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Jamie, last time we spoke, it was just after I read another of your books, The Hundred Years' War, the book about the rivalry between New Zealand and South Africa. It's an incredible book. I've linked all of your books in the show notes, of course. A couple new chapters in that ongoing history have unfolded since then, including a heartbreaking World Cup final, unfavorable results in the boringly named Rugby Championship. If you were going to add an appendix to that book, what would you be saying right now?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Uh, it's really nice to hear from people that have read it, and I'll never get sick
It's
of
an
the positive
incredible book, I
feedback.
swear. Even if I wasn't into rugby, it's an incredible read anyway. Just for the competition level. Anyway, the history, it's great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, if I did add in what's happened since, it'd ruin the title of the book, unfortunately, which I'm really happy with because it's the best title I've come up with. So it'd have to be a sequel starting now. So maybe the next 100 years if I can live that long.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, but in terms of what's happened since, I mean, it's been kind of weird because obviously didn't play the Springboks for a while since the COVID break and everything, and they
Right.
left Super Rugby as well. So there's been this very much feeling of like they've gone back to being what they were in the old days, which was this sort of bit of mystique around them. We don't know too much about
This
their players.
nebulous body that exists out there.
Yeah, yeah, or like this sort of faraway kingdom
Yeah.
that we're going to go to war with one day, but we don't really know that much about it. It's kind of cool in a way. Um, the World Cup final, I think, like was, I mean, obviously, disappointing that the All Blacks lost. I mean, personally, I didn't think it was that great a game.
Hmm.
Had it been a better game, I'd probably have more to say about it, but nothing about it really stuck in my mind. Like, if you're a South African watching this right now and you're shaking your fist at me, like, yeah, fair enough. Like, but had you been on the other end, had anyone been on the other side of that result, I think they'd be saying the same thing. It wasn't a great watch. It was a very dour, um, real throwback to the old days kind of game.
Yeah.
Um, and it had this sort of moment of controversy in it that was just uh, really highlighted what's wrong with rugby's officiating right now. Well, actually, two. And like we have the 20-minute red card down here in Super Rugby, which has actually worked really well. I think like there's just a lot of talk about it on social media. It's turned into this
Oh
stupid
yes.
culture war thing, which I really don't have any time for because I don't understand why people um, don't want to give it a go. I honestly think a lot of the pushback against it is because people don't actually understand how it works.
It does
Um,
seem that there's some confusion about the actual parameters,
yeah, well,
but
it's not that hard to understand. Like, if you do something dumb, you get sent off, and then 20 minutes later, someone else comes on to replace you. I think that a lot of people think that you get to come back on after 20 minutes.
right.
That's not what happens. It got used in Super Rugby, and there was like zero complaints about it at all. and only positive feedback about the way that it worked, because people were saying, great, they can get back to 15 or 15. And then for really heinous acts like deliberate, foul play, you still have the straight red, to send
Right.
someone off. And that happened during Super Rugby as well. Again, no complaints. So it just kind of goes to show that, people don't want to even accept the slightest bit of change. So I mean, you had that incident, and then you had that stupid TMO intervention in the second half that they got the call right, but under their own guidelines, they weren't really allowed to do it. So like, how you square that up when was Aaron Smith scored. And then the whole thing just kind of came down to a missed kick, and it was like, okay, yeah. And also the time that it was on in New Zealand didn't really help either. It was on at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and so everyone was really depressed by like 9 a.m. and just wanted to get on with their day. And then this year we had the tour over there. I was lucky enough to be there
That's right.
for it. It was my first
You had a
time
great
in
time in
South
South
Africa.
Africa. It looks like you got some great hospitality and really enjoyed yourself.
It's really good. I can't speak highly enough of the place. It's a very complicated, interesting place to be at.
Yeah.
It's quite, a lot of it was quite confronting for me coming from a place like New Zealand, and to see the sort of levels of security and uh, that sort of thing that goes on. Even just simply getting to and from the ground on
Mm.
game day required like a police escort for us.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so I mean, I would have liked to have seen more of Johannesburg, but we just didn't have the sort of time and capacity to take it all in. Cape Town was a little different. We were lucky enough to be staying down on the waterfront, so we could get out and walk around freely. We were lucky enough to get up Table Mountain on a really nice day. And then the games themselves were just fantastic. Like, two amazing stadiums, two amazing atmospheres, great fans. Like, can't speak highly enough of Springbok fans. They're so passionate, very friendly. All of them very knowledgeable as well. Pretty one-eyed, but that's fair enough. Like, I can live with that. But I think South African rugby fans get have earned themselves a pretty rough reputation on social media. And I like the fact that I was able to sort of disprove that in real life. Like, a lot of it
Yeah,
just comes
yeah.
from a place of real passion, and
I got that
I quite
feeling.
like that. I quite like
That's
that.
great.
And also right now the Springboks are such hot property. Obviously they're world champions. They have
They're just so damn
they're
good right
really
now.
well. Also, they're very symbolic of what South Africa sort of wants to see itself as a country, where
Yeah.
you have a lot of different cultures coming together to achieve this goal. You have a white South African as a coach and a black South
The way
African as
they've
a captain,
become
and
the
they
Rainbow Nation. They talked about the Rainbow
yeah
Nation, but
yeah
now
yeah
it feels like they've become that. It's a thing.
yeah yeah. I think so. I think so too. And also the fact that they are this year kind of disproving the fact that they only care about World Cups, and they're only going to load up
Mm,
every sort of 4 years. Like, they've got enough talent there to basically put out two test sides any weekend that were capable of beating
definitely.
anybody.
So I'm sure you probably feel this way. Like, I love rooting against the Springboks. Like, they're such a convenient sports villain. You know what I mean? Like, Bill Simmons in America talks about this a lot. Like, I don't actually hate any of these teams. I just sports hate them. Like, it's fun for me to say I hate them and really strongly root against them. The Springboks embody that for me. But I have to say, I have lots of questions about certain things he's done, but it seems to me Rassie Erasmus is the only international coach actively trying new things all the time. Every time there's a wrinkle that has people talking, it's almost certainly come from the box, whether it's the 6-2 or even the 7-1 split, flashing lights in the booth, like creating fake social media accounts and accidentally posting defamatory videos. Anyway, not all these things are home runs, but like, why are other coaches so timid to try things? Am I wrong? It seems like Rassie's the only one who's like, I'm going to try new things week in and week out and see what happens and make my team better.
Yeah, I mean, you have to ask him that, because he's literally the only coach who wants to embrace having a public profile in that way. He's the only coach who's on social media,
Hmm.
so it's a lot easier to get a kind of an insight into what he's thinking, what he's about. He's a real force of nature in press conferences. He literally talks for 45 minutes straight, dropping in and out of English and Afrikaans the whole time. And what he says, like everyone just hangs on every word that he says. Not an awful, some of it doesn't seem to make any sense. But they're the world champions. They beat the All Blacks twice this year. They're going
But
into these
but he's
tests at the
innovating.
end of the year as
Who else
favourites.
is innovating? Who else is saying
Well,
I'm
well,
gonna try this new thing?
I'd like to think Scott Robertson is, but we're not seeing that innovation yet because it feels like he's just trying to lay
Right.
the groundwork for it.
Right. So
I
is it just a matter of time? Does Razor have this in him, and is we just haven't seen it yet?
hope so. But yeah, like I hope that the fact that Test rugby being every weekend's like a Super Rugby final for him is not going to scare him into um, changing the way that he worked when he was with the Crusaders. I think on the other, I mean, I think Joe Schmidt would like to be that guy as well.
Oh, interesting.
He probably just doesn't have the players to be able to do it.
Huh.
And I think Farrell is a guy who is innovative in the way that he's constantly improving the way that this Irish team is playing.
So the World Rugby rankings, as we're speaking right now, list the top five as Ireland, South Africa, New Zealand, France, and England. Do you think that's accurate?
Uh, well, no, because Ireland haven't played a game since July.
That is
So
a little
like
weird.
this is
The math
this
is
is the
weird.
worst. This is literally the worst time to look at a world rankings,
Yeah, yeah.
because who knows what's happened. Like, don't get me wrong, I still think they're obviously very, very good team, but you can't come in ranked number one having not played for while every other team has been playing the whole time. And this
Do
is
you
kind
think
of the
that top
fella.
five is the top five though, in a different order,
Uh
perhaps?
yeah, yeah. No, no, don't get me wrong. Like those are definitely the five best teams in the
Hmm.
world, and that's because that's the way it's been for the last like little while anyway. Like, I mean, if you look at like who's even knocking on the door of that, like it's certainly not the Wallabies. It's not Wales, and yeah, it's definitely not Italy. So there's not really or Scotland. So there's not really anyone else. It's those five are just going to be changing places for the next little while. You'd think.
Well, the next five are of course Argentina, Scotland, Italy, Australia,
Oh,
and
apologies.
Fiji.
I would say sorry. I would say that Argentina at least deserve to be higher in that regard. Like they've beaten the All Blacks and the Springboks in the same year.
Yeah.
I
Right.
don't I don't I don't think that I'd like to know if any team's done that uh, uh, in the professional era.
I don't
Who's
think so, but there's the permutations of the
there
schedule, and
has to
so
have been someone, but it hasn't been done for a long time.
so between Argentina, Scotland, Italy, Australia, and Fiji, which of those teams do you think will not be in the top 10 at all if we were talking this time next year?
Well, probably Fiji or Wales, because I think that's
Things could get worse for Wales. It's incredible to think, but it's possible.
yeah, yeah. I think that if Wales's contingency plan is to keep going under Warren Gatland, then they're screwed because that guy has proven that he's just out of ideas. And then Fiji's entire uh, setup is based on how many players they can ever get released at any one time and how much
Right.
lead-in time they have. So they're kind of their whole program is at the mercy of other global competitions. So there's sort of a few more external factors as well. I think maybe I don't know enough about the Scottish team, but they definitely strike me as a country that's only ever going to be good when they have kind of four or five world class players at any one time, and whether
Hmm.
they're actually going to have them this time next year, I'm not sure about that. I could be wrong. But I think out of those teams, the Pumas are the ones that definitely deserve to be up in the next conversation.
What are you looking forward to in the next year for New Zealand? What's your predictions for the next few tests they have to finish out this autumn series? And how will you start to feel confident that you know that Scott Robertson's taking this team in the right direction?
Well, they need to win their next two for me to be assured of that. And
What's the mood in
have
New Zealand if they get spanked by Ireland? If it's a bad loss, what's the mood in New Zealand?
yeah, well, I think that then we'll start to maybe not so much see the knives out, but at least some hands on some, you know,
Some
what do you
hilts,
call it?
yeah,
Yeah.
some scabbards.
And then some serious scrutiny over what would happen against France, because that would be, yeah, 5 test losses in a year, and that's up there with, well, it's not what we expected out of Scott Robertson's first year in charge. There were some pretty close predictions that they could win every test this year. That's not going to happen. Um, Obviously, it's like there's definitely like a story around every loss that the All Blacks have had this year and reasons sort of why. But it's the All Blacks. They can't lose this many in a year.
How good is Wallace Atiti right now?
Oh, he's fantastic, man. Like, but it's real no surprise to anyone that was keeping an eye on him during Super Rugby. He was one of the form players. He was a slightly controversial selection to begin with because of the form of Hoskins Tutu, who was playing for the Blues.
Right.
But I think that if there's one thing you can say that Robertson's 100% done right this year is the new guys that he's brought in have all been really justified solutions. You've had Satiri's looking at being the World Rugby Breakthrough Player of the Year. Ratima's looked really good at halfback. He wasn't at his best
Yeah.
on Saturday, I feel, but he has definitely been made that step up. Sam Derry at lock, he's not like a frontline lock here, but he hasn't done anything wrong, and he's like a guy who's going to probably play a pretty interesting role going forward.
He's a bit of a preview for the future, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean he's just simply like the biggest guy going around, and so
Mm.
and he's got obviously very good ball skills and set piece skills as well. And then the other one, Billy Proctor, who won't be featuring for the next couple of weeks because he's had to return back to New Zealand, but he's looked really good in the 2 times that he's played as well. So I think that Satiti has been probably the pick of the bunch, but clearly what's that showing is that new guys coming into this are being given everything they need in order to thrive in this environment. That's a really positive sign, I think, from Scott Robertson.
Mm. I love that. I've been hearing a lot of criticism about Anton Leonard Brown. I feel like I've never really understood what is so great about him in the first place, and now it seems like everyone's complaining about him. Where should I land on Antoine Leonard Brown?
Well,
Not
he
Antoine.
certainly didn't have his
Anton.
he certainly didn't have his best game on the weekend. But in saying that, I think any criticism is pretty unfair because to me, he's definitely been one of the most consistent All Blacks of the last, well, ever since he started. He's actually been around for quite a while now. He's played almost 80 tests, I
Oh wow.
think. So he is actually one of the most experienced members in the team. That his issue though is that he's never been an established starting player
Right.
because of the amount of rotation that's involved, been going ever since like Conrad Smith and Marnonu finished. So I think that the reason people are kind of down on him is because he hasn't really done anything like amazing this year. But then again, it is a midfield that very much runs on what Geordie Barrett is capable of. Like Rico, I think has only scored like 1 try all year, so it's more about the centre has been far more of a defensive position than anything else for the All Blacks right now, and that's why maybe it's just because I mean, he also hasn't been picked either. Like it's not his. I mean, Geordie and Rico have been the starting centre combinations for every major test this year, and Antoine's come off the bench. So yeah, it's a little unfair, I think. But like I said, I think it's just mainly because he came off a test match in which he got yellow carded in a really crucial situation.
Well, you mentioned my final question of the night, and thank you so much for spending all this time. Rico Ioane, I've been a little down on him for like, I don't know, 18 months. I feel like I haven't seen him giving us what we need. It seems like he's a little back. It's the last couple tests I've seen. It seems like he's got some of that attitude back. He's got some of that physicality back. Are you seeing, an upswing from Rico Ioane?
Yes, and that's like I said. I think his defensive work's been really good. He came off for like a really specialized role in the Blues as well. And I think what people expect out of Rico is that he's there to score tries. That's not the case anymore. He's moved in off the
Right.
wing, to play centre. Like, there's a reason why he did that, was to prolong his career as an All Black. Because if he'd stayed on the wing, he'd be long gone by now. He
Interesting.
would have been just surpassed by everyone else. It speaks a lot to his ambitions as a player and his
Yeah, yeah,
loyalty,
yeah.
because
That's
also the
exactly it.
reason,
The defense is what I've seen from him recently. That it made me go, "Oh, he's
yeah.
back."
But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that he could have packed up and left a long time ago
Mm,
and cashed up and gone to Japan or France or whatever, and made like big money. He wanted to stay and he wanted to win a title with the Blues. He's done that, and it meant so much to him. He admitted, I was there in the changing rooms, and he admitted to us, this means more to me than the World Cup. Because it's his home, it's where he grew up, it's the team that he first started with. And you got to remember, when he started with that team, they were rubbish. They were basically like what the Highlanders are now. You know, and there was no one would have thought they were ever going to win it in championship. So for him to have stuck around and to have repurposed himself as a player that's going to take advantage of like his own skill set, and play at centre, like, that says a lot to me. Like, I've got a lot of respect for that.
Final thing, Super Rugby is still a few months away, but fans like me, it was the first competition I ever started watching. Give me a name of a player I should be watching out for in Super Rugby this year.
Hmm, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of someone you wouldn't have heard of. Um,
I'm
I
sure
think,
there's some 19-year-old in Canterbury or Wellington who's just like
yeah,
dying to get
yeah,
off the
yeah.
blocks.
I I think, going into, I mean, it's kind of hard because they haven't. They're naming all the squads next week,
Mm.
so I don't actually. I can't
I
tell you
caught you
because
just
there's a
early.
few. There's a few guys coming out of NPC, which, I mean, obviously, like the Hurricanes, I think are probably the youngest and most exciting team, like in terms of the guys who, uh,
They're going to be so good.
gonna be All Blacks, and also because they came into this season with just no expectations on them whatsoever, and ended up almost winning it,
Yeah.
and playing some of the best rugby that you'll see. So I think in terms of a team, the Hurricanes are the ones you want to keep an eye on, because they're either going to do it again and go one step further, or in typical Hurricanes fashion, they'll completely blow out and come last. So I
They
think
had a
that,
great season this year. They were so fun to watch. It was great.
yeah, yeah. So I think that just keep an eye on them, and if you get hold of me, sort of nearer the time, I'll be able to tell you some players to watch.
Well, Jamie Wall, you are one of my favorite people on this blue marble to talk to at all. It's such a pleasure. Any final thoughts on the New Zealand tour or the state of the game in the Aotearoa?
I think that this year has been an interesting one for rugby, just in general. We've gone
Mm,
through quite a sort of tumultuous last sort of few years, just in terms of the perception of the All Blacks themselves, the perception of the game itself. We've talked about it, a lot of those things, in the last hour or so that we've been talking. Um, and I think that the game is definitely feels like it's sort of trending up. It's in a place where it's trying to find its way in a very interesting media landscape, like
yeah.
trying to, uh, hold on to the uh, massive amount of attention that it gets here, and utilize it into something that can make it like truly the national game again. Like, don't get me wrong, it's still very, very popular, and people are still going, and people are still watching it on TV. But I think that just with the few right tweaks here and there, it can get back to being something that's really representative of the whole country. And one of the most important things to do with that is success. So a lot is riding on the next few weeks for the All Blacks.
It's going to be great. I can't wait. I'll be rooting for them the whole way. Jamie Wall, you are the absolute best. Thank you. And thank you again for taking so much time today to talk to us. Let's find another time again soon. Maybe we'll do a Super Rugby preview or an early season check-in or something. In the meantime, to all of you across the globe, cheers. Talk to you soon. And be well.
It gives me great pleasure to be here today.
Oh, it does, neat. You want to tempt the wrath of the whatever from high atop the thing?